nailed it on the head. We must abolish the Federal Reserve because it's just a collection of central bankers, most of which are foreign central bankers.
Yes.
They're not even American central bankers. Will you agree? Ron Paul hit it on the head, and that's why they did him in.
Well, see, here again, we have the opportunity here. We have write-ins. And what Mr. Wagener is sitting here saying, he's absolutely correct. Others, write it in. We've got enough people out here, and this is one of the issues that I get into with my own study group, is, well, if we need to give up our registry to vote. No. Everything that was done inside the political arena here. We need to start putting in our own candidates. Write in Ron Paul. Write in an independent for your state legislator. Get rid of the Democrats, get rid of the Republicans, because they're the ones that create the problem here. Go back in. We could change the system by writing in who we want in there. And that comes back to the people. We have that right. That's part of our job. But see, we got people out here who don't know what our job description is. This is part of the problem here. It's like you and I talked here earlier, and I showed you a little bit under this corpus juris secundum book that we have here. All right. People sitting on the grand jury, they are influenced by the prosecutor. They are influenced by the judge. You cannot sit down and try to bring charges against a public official, because the moment you do, the prosecutor sits down and says, oh, no, you can't do that. We found the rule book. It's under Corpus Juris Secundum, volume 38A, under grand juries. It sits here and it plainly explains that a grand jury can go back and do an investigation. You need a criminal report put into the sheriff department, and the sheriff goes back in and does an investigation. If he finds enough evidence of corruption on the public official side, they can get a grand jury convened and go back in and start prosecuting judges, prosecutors, and other public officials. This is their job. This is where the grand jury falls short. You don't know what the job description is. You don't understand. You're only going by what they're telling you. These people are lying through their teeth to the American people. They sit down in was it 1700s, someplace in that area, is where they took out and they took the judges and they hung them, they tarred and feathered them. They sit down and boiled them in oil. The Bar Association has come back in, any history, any documents on this, they have turned around and they have hidden all this stuff, and this is part of the retaliation back on what they're doing, because they're going to make sure it never happens again. Well, people, we're starting to wake up out here. We're coming back in and we're educating the American people. This is part of what we're doing on AIB radio. We're coming in and we're bringing in the facts, the truth. We're telling you where the documents are at. We're proving the documents. We're pulling up the congressional records. We're pulling up the books. We're pulling up the history. And we're asking people to go back and read it for themselves. Understand what you're reading. Understand the history. Understand the fraud. Everybody talks about the corruption. Everybody talks about the evil doing. But when it comes right down to pinpoint it, people can't. And this is part of what our group is doing. We're sitting here and bringing across all this information. March 10th, 1899, in Delaware legislation, the Corporate Trust Company, the Delaware Trust Company, the Wilmington Trust Company went before Delaware legislation, and they had a law passed called an Act Providing General Corporate Law. In that law, they went back in and created a corporation to be a person, has all the same rights, all the same privileges as you and I. Back in 1886, Supreme Court right here in Santa Clara, California, went back and made a ruling that a corporation is a person, but it made it on a limited capacity. These courts have turned around and has redefined the word person to a corporation. They're dragging us in as businesses. They're dragging us in as corporations. And when you go back and challenge them on this, oh, no, you're misinterpreting the words. But if you get into the Delaware Code under Title 8, under corporations, get into Chapter 6, under Section 617, it tells you, how do you name a corporation? A corporation has to have a last name. This is the name game that they're playing. The style manual that they've created, The style manual is modifying the grammar that we were taught. This is modifying their grammar. They're coming in with all caps. This is where the all caps name come in at. So between the style manual and the Delaware legislation under Title VIII, under corporation, and the Delaware passing that law under a general law providing general corporate law here, this is how they're bringing us in as persons. This is how they're bringing us in as corporations. They're sitting here and misusing the words. The problem is we got patriot groups out here, and they're wanting to, well, if they're going to use this word, then we're going to change this word to have this meaning. What we're doing is this. We're bringing people back into the balance. What was the word? What was the definition of that word prior to the Bar Association changing the definition? What was the word prior to the courts changing the definition? This is what we're trying to pull back in, because once you go back into the original intent of what the name was, what the law was, they can't argue original intent. And this is why we're pulling congressional records on what we're doing. This is why we're getting into their books. This is why we're pulling up their definitions. We're educating the American people on all this stuff. And these courts we're starting to walk into with the paperwork. And the biggest issue that we have, and like we tell the people, you have to be able to understand the paperwork. You've got to be able to back the paperwork. You've got to be able to explain it. Because if you can't explain it and you hesitate, the judge is going to drop the hammer on you. Because he knows you knew and he's not going to allow you to get away with it. But you also go into courts with groups of people with you, with witnesses that you have in these courtrooms. But everything that we're doing, the rules of court, here again, this was created by Congress. This was created through the Enabling Act. Congress created the rules on how these courts are to operate. These are their rules, their regulations, their guidelines, their stipulations. They are supposed to follow these procedures. Here again, it falls right back under Title 28, United States Code, under the Judiciary and Judicial Procedure. This whole thing is their procedural section. And it takes right back into Title V, because it tells you under the United States Code, under Title 28, a U.S. citizen is those who belong to the District of Columbia, belongs to the territories, it belongs to the Virgin Islands, Guam, and Puerto Rico. So whenever you sign your cards, are you a U.S. citizen? No, you are not, because the law says a U.S. citizen is in the District of Columbia. It tells you it's in Guam, Puerto Rico, and the Virgin Islands. It says the territories. This is where they're coming back in and modifying the language. They're modifying the words here. The American people are not aware of the definitional change of what the court system has done. Congress has done their job, because under Article 1, Section 8, Congress can only deal with and only sit down and create laws that deals in commerce and deals with international. So if you go back and really understand what they've done, pretty much of this stuff in the past, they've ran commerce, they've ran international. They did not come out and deal with the American people. It is the Bar Association, it is the court system that is coming in and redefining the language. They're coming in on court cases to where they're bringing people in who don't have the money. They're sitting down and creating court cases to start a record to modify the language. This is part of the issues and part of the problems that we're having out here. This is why we're trying to educate the American people on everything that we're doing. It's up to us to get educated. It's up to us to sit down and take our country back. And it can be done peacefully. We can sit down and we can start putting pressure on legislation. We can start putting pressure on Congress. Changing those who are sitting in Congress right now who signed for that $1 trillion bet to put on you. It's time for these people to be taken out of office. It's time for them to be impeached. It's time for them to sit down and have their properties taken off of them. It's time for eminent domain on these people. It is time to have them removed and everything to pay back the debt that they created. And it falls into the 14th Amendment, Section 4, back to the public debt. These people are responsible for it, not you and I.